Hello. Hi. Thank you so much, Sahil, for that kind intro. Many of those were facts I didn't know anyone knew. So thanks for the research. I won't pitch sales tech to you because we target only very large enterprises in terms of our own target buyer profile, right? But let me just quickly introduce. I'm Yamini. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Vymo. Vymo is about 5 years old now. We are present in 7 countries. We have about 40 plus customers and 100,000 salespeople across these customers use Vymo. It's a mobile-first solution that sits on top of CRM to suggest next best actions to sales teams. So that's the end of it. One of my very quirky DNA things is that I care a lot about productivity. Even when before this, I used to work at McKinsey. Office was in Mumbai, Express Towers, very tall building. And we would wait for elevators to go to the 21st floor. And they had this really screwed up elevator system where you had to wait for the next one and then it would stop at every other floor, right? And that would really bother me until the point that I used to start speaking to housekeeping and facilities managers saying, why can't you just redesign this thing, right? So productivity issues, leakage, etc. bother me a lot. Vymo also solves sales productivity related issues. So it was no wonder that my DNA seeped into what I decided to build. I was invited, just to clarify the topic, I was invited to talk about SaaS Matrics and how they help companies scale and be successful. So that's the topic. For us, there is one thing that we focus on metrics for. Ideally, you want your team to do more, right? Whether it's end sales outcomes or individual KRAs that they need to influence. If it's pipeline, you want them to do more. If it's turnaround time to deal closure, you want them to do it in lesser time, right? But you want to constantly keep improving. And fundamentally, metrics help you move the needle. But metrics, if any of you have read blogs, is a very, very confusing space. You will see at least, you just Google SaaS metrics and you'll see every blog with 15 metrics that you need to track. It's very, very overwhelming, right? I just want to make sure I'm catering to the audience here. So quick show of hands. How many of you are SaaS founders? Okay, quite a bit. And how many of you have sub 1 million in revenue? 1 to 5? Greater than 5? Okay, fantastic. Okay, so tell me, I have a 2-minute version of this presentation, then I have a 4-minute, 5-minute version, and then I have a 15-minute version. So if you have Q&A, we'll go with that. Otherwise, I'll get out if I've bored you. So Vymo's mission is to help teams do more, and that's because our internal DNA and that of every person is also to try and do more in everyday things that we do. In fact, one of my secret wishes was that we would disrupt the whole Bangalore work scene by saying, let's just move to a 4-day work week, because if we are truly a productivity company and we care so much about productivity internally, we can do it, right? And then Satya Nadella stole my thunder. And yesterday, I think there was this news that came up on Japan, right? So, but anyway, good stuff happening. But that's still our aspiration sometime, right? What do metrics really help you with? The number one thing that a founder can do for a company that is scaling or at any life stage is to give clarity and focus. There are 100 things you can track and you can get really consulting, geekish about it. But ultimately, at any point in your life stage, depending on where you are in your life stage, there is probably only one metric that matters way more than the rest for your company overall. It's very, very important to know really what that metric is. You can really sound cool to investors. Are there investors in this room? Okay, great. You can sound really cool and relevant to investors by talking about the 20 things that you track. But ultimately, within your team, you have to remove the confusion. You have to bring focus, right? So there is usually only one metric that matters most at a company level and one metric that should matter most at a certain point in time for a particular team, a function, or an individual. Maybe at times it might seep into a second one because you're trying to move from stage A to stage B, but never more than that. So if anyone in your team has 3 metrics, the first big takeaway from this session is just go bring it down to 1, right? That brings clarity, a lot of focus. That particular metric should define what you want them to truly feel ownership about. And as long as you can actually explain why that metric matters to your company, and tie it to the vision of what you want to achieve this year and tie it down to what should matter to them, you will get intense amount of ownership within the company. We have had quality testers in the team care about ARR of the company and ask a sales leader walking into the office, number kya lagega ye quarter, right? Because a lot of things are tied to that number within the company at that life stage. It brings unity. It's very important to be careful what this number is because it can lead to bad behaviors. It can lead to non-collaboration. If it requires one person to succeed at the cost of someone's success, it can lead to that also, right? And it's very human nature. It's not that your people are bad people. They're just optimizing for their own goals and incentives. So it can go either way, the way you pick your metric. It's very important that at your life stage, you know what that should be and what it should be for your team, right? The other very important, so the first most important thing, right, which is if you had to take away one thing, this was my 2-minute thing. If you had to take away one thing from this session, make sure that there's only one metric that you're focusing across the company, within each function, and at each individual level. The metric might be slightly different for each of these groups, right? Now, that particular metric may actually change depending on your life stage. For example, very early on, when we did not have we were testing product market fit, right? The most important thing that we focused on after you define your customer profile, which is, do you want a 100K sale or do you want a $100 sale, right? Once you've decided what your target market and ideal customer is, at least you have a hunch, right? 3 years later, that'll be very different. But once you have a hunch, the number one thing that mattered to us was going and closing those logos. If it means that the CTO of the company has to come with the salesperson for a meeting to go and get that logo, you might as well do it, right? And if it means that, you're making a PPT, which probably a IT guy is making a PPT, tech guy is making a PPT, so be it. We'll do what it takes to get those logos because all of us are learning, right? And everyone is focused on that mission statement. That was the number one thing that mattered to us at an early life stage. Very soon, when logos were coming in, and then we cared about value of those logos because, hey, listen, pilot is one thing. We ideally want someone bigger value, committed for the whole year, and we want value of the deal to matter because the amount of effort that it's taking to make each of these clients successful is quite a bit. We want higher ticket sizes, etc. That's why we shifted to bookings, right? And bookings, by the way, even in the first life stage, maybe booking was what mattered to the sales guy. But for the company, the logos mattered. And it brought everyone together. In the second life stage, the bookings mattered. So here is when dollar value of the deals mattered. What can we pitch as product to actually show them value? So it's not just a mobile first SFA tool. It's actually going to drive sales transformation. Okay, how do we prove how we drive sales transformation? Here is how the life journey looks like. Even putting those stories together, converting the product to be able to do all of that, delivering that value in terms of sales, service, etc. Everything was focused on that so that we could get to those volume numbers in terms of bookings, right? Today, what matters to the company? We raised an A, we raised a B. We know that our bookings are reasonably credible and consistent at this point in time. Sales team still focuses on bookings. But to the company today, what matters is what the deployed number is. How many of those customers are we retaining? How are we growing those customers? Now, there are 10 metrics that influence ARR. But as a rally cry, what the company every single person on the company knows is what the ARR at the end of this year should be and what the ARR at this point in time is, right? Everyone in the team should know that. If you're in testing, it doesn't matter. If you're in marketing, it doesn't matter. If you're in, if you're in engineering, product, it doesn't matter. You need to know what the number is, right? But the whole company should care about that number and influence what kind of decisions they make. This, over time, can roll into very different things for your team, right? So quickly doubling back on that. Firstly, do not even bother with this if you have less than 2-3 people in each function, right? You don't need to create this level of complexity. But it's very easy to marry vision of the company to things that should matter for each function. For example, how do we marry something like ARR to what's important at that point in time? For example, if churn is your big risk, right? Or deployment time or client seeing success and therefore renewing or expanding with you is a very big thing, then ideally product and UX teams would have adoption as a key metric, right? Because that will drive size of your deal, how many users they will put on your system, how many other lines of business they'll expand you to, etc. Right? If, for example, if it's about number of logos you're winning, then probably win rate is what it will translate to. From a sales and marketing point of view, total pipeline and conversion rate will matter, right? Now, as the teams grow, right, and you hit scale and you suddenly start seeing that, hey, pipeline metric is moving very well. Bookings metric is moving in its own direction. Somehow it doesn't seem like as pipeline is growing, booking is growing at the same pace, which means suddenly it's an effectiveness issue. And when that issue becomes big enough, you have a different team. There is a conversion and productivity team, which could be called sales enablement. It could be called sales operations. It could be but basically there's an individual who needs to focus on what is happening in pipeline and why is it not converting into booking. In our case, it was sales operations, then it became product marketing, right? Who was responsible for moving the needle on that number. And then customer success, the speed of your launch matters to the delivery team, right? If you don't launch quickly, how will you recognize revenue? Quality of that deployment matters, adoption matters, retention, all of those matter, but usually it's very important to show how they link back to the original goal, because each of those numbers moving by 10% will also move the ARR number. And everyone on the team needs to know that. Every function in the company needs to know how they individually add up to the sum total of where you're going. And that's the second most important thing about setting metrics. The most important thing in arriving at this table, I know a lot of you are taking photos, don't share this with your team, or even try to explain that your team should be doing this, right? Because what we tracked at each level changed dramatically at every life stage of the company, right? You will already intuitively know, when you're trying to talk about 3 metrics to your team, you'll intuitively know which one matters most at that particular life stage. It'll be very different in the next life stage, right? BD people, for example, we target large enterprises. BD people's goal 1 year ago was to get us the number of meetings that they were getting for the A's. Then it became the total pipeline that they were creating, number of opportunities. Now it is value of the pipeline. Life stages move because our BD people are also getting better and better, and we are also getting sharper and sharper at what we do, right? So we can define it much more clearly. And also we are at a stage where that clarity will make or break us, right? The other part about metrics is to know where to create collaboration. It's quite possible. For example, many times I've seen this when we interview folks, pre-sales, sales, customer success, etc. We usually ask them what are they measured on in their current company, and how do they think they have been able to. What if they want to make higher variable, 200% of their variable, right? What did they make last year? Oh, you made only 70%? How come? Because these were your metrics, right? How did that link? And we try to understand whether people get how they're going to make money and what they're being measured on, right? Because many times, some of these goals, the overall company's retention number is 50% of your incentive. How do you influence the overall company's retention across 1,000 customers? Some of the largest software companies in the world actually have that, right? Some of the largest Silicon Bay Area companies have that, right? And the individuals just don't understand, which means they are okay with some of these failing because 50% is anyway linked to this massive thing, which if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. They can't influence it. The other 50%, they'll pick one thing that they can move the needle on, right? We have very often seen, for example, pre-sales is caught between sales and customer success, right? Customer success wants to do retention, right? Sales wants to do bookings. And for both of these, they need the solutioning and pre-sales experts to come and talk to the clients about the product. If you're incentivizing them on bookings, they'll go to the customer success team and say, this is already an existing customer. It's not going to make a difference to me, right? In our case, this is one area, for example, where we did 50-50 incentives. Half of your life is tied to sales guy, half of your life is tied to keeping existing customers and growing them, right? But defining, there are usually teams that matter a lot in trying to bridge the gap between two different functions, and that's where maybe you will see some split of metrics. Even this may change the day we have specialized, the day we become big enough to say pre-sales solutioning team is different from customer success solutioning team, we'll separate this out, right? Otherwise, ideally, even this, I know that we are doing this only because we don't have that kind of scale. The moment we have it, it's 1 metric per person. When you're talking about metrics, the biggest challenge that people have, the reason people say there is this metric, then there's this other metric, then there's third metric that will track for you, is because they're trying to incentivize long-term behaviors. Now, I don't know how well this will work for other companies, but here is a very nice thing we do. Our annual year is between April to March. Every January, the leadership in the team, which is the VPs of every function, come together for an annual planning session. Until 2 years ago, every year what we were doing was to say, hey, let's come together. Let's see what have we achieved. What do we need to achieve? Okay, we did 4 crores or so in booking. Let's do like 3 times of that, 12 crores or so in booking. This was like a couple of years ago, right? And it was easy to plan for that because, you had 2 AEs, we did 4. Now you'll do 2 into 3 times. You'll have 6 AEs. 2 of them will not be successful. So you'll have 8 AEs, and that's my plan for the year, right? what we saw was that people were optimizing wisely for what they needed to achieve in that particular goal, because your planning cycle is 1 year, right? And that's because that's how we make budgets, that's how we report progress, etc. What matters is what we realized last year. What we did was, I saw that people came into this annual planning session, and usually something that takes 2 years, 2 days for us, this January took exactly 2 hours. Everyone was aligned because we just had to scale 3 times. So everyone multiplied the numbers by 3 and like budget is ready within 1 week, right? And I didn't understand, how can it be so easy? We are like a growth stage startup. There is so much to do. How can it be so? It just cannot be that easy, right? Because if we do a 3x this year, we have to do a 2 and a something x next year. And many SaaS companies are saying that that's not easy and they're struggling with it. This cannot be this easy. So then I went back and saw what the projections meant, where we would be in March 2020. And realized if that's where we actually end in March 2020, we're going to have a very, very screwed up 2021. Right? Because we were actually optimizing for what needs to close here, not really what the opening of that year should look like. So then we went back and said, we actually redid the leadership session where we said, hey, let's actually write down the 3-year journey and the 2-year plan, which is where we came up with the strategy of, if we need to be 100 million, we need 100 customers of $1 million each. And suddenly we said, how many of them do we have? How many of them can we grow to that stage? How many do we need to acquire? And how much time do we need for an account to grow from like a 200K to a 1 million account? Right? And how do we map that journey out? And suddenly you're like, there is so much to do. And there were these levers for Horizon 2 that you were not even planning for. There was difference in how people needed to behave. We need a whole customer success organization that we've not even built. Right? And suddenly you realize that, oh, okay, it's not just about, if you actually have to have a successful year beyond this, then probably we need to plan for 2 years later. Right? And there'll be a lot of unknowns that you'll discover along the journey, but at least the known piece, you know how to scale it really well and not be caught off guard, right? So suddenly we started opening up all these levers for plan B, plan C, plan D. So there is a no-fail situation that we can end up in. And that is not easy because it becomes a theoretical exercise. The very important thing to do is do it consistently. So every quarter, we actually write down again and say, hey, the 2-year plan, let's look at it. Has it changed 2 years from now, the rolling 24 months? Do we think something would be different? Have we learned anything? Like this morning, we did the call for the next 2 years with the leadership team and said, are we seeing anything different? Because we're coming to the half year, right? And we aligned on a couple of things which need to be reprioritized, which is a big deal. Everyone is constantly thinking of the longer race than just, I just need to finish this quarter, and if I close this deal, it's done, right? So that's the other thing that matters. Now, how do you allow for creativity and untapped potential? Because if you are a genius enough to say, we put these 10 AEs and this many engineers and suddenly we'll be 3x as a company, then clearly you're missing on some upside, right? It can't be that straightforward. And there is genius in the team because there are people who are very, very focused on specific problems and can move the needle, right? So what we do is this. Till now, very rarely, once or twice I've said no to a budget. I've been asked for at least 100 times in the last 16, 18 months on, hey, can I hire this person more? Can I deploy this tool? Can I probably buy something else for my team or do an event, right? And at any point in time, basic questions we ask them is, the metrics are broken down. You know what your metrics are, right? Do you believe that number will change? You're saying your quota was X. Do you think it'll be X plus something? Are you willing to? You can get the guy, but the guy will have a 1 million quota and it'll roll up to you. If you're willing to accept that, I'm willing to invest in you, right? So as long as people are willing to say, hey, I want to deploy this tool. My BDRs schedule 8 meetings in 4 weeks. With this tool, I feel productivity will go up. It's been showing phenomenal results all over the world. I said, fantastic. Instead of 8, can you do 9? Can I make that the target? Let's give you 1-2 months to learn, but will you make it 9? And there is ownership on the person also. Now, that investment, no one will say no to your investment, but we'll also pull it off if it doesn't work the way it is, right? The best part in our company has been till now we have not had to pull off the investment because people have been aligned upfront and taken the commitment and moved their own targets to accommodate for the additional investment they're asking. They've actually been extremely focused on measuring that metric and making sure it moves. If not this tool, some other tool. So Yamini won't ask us this question, right? Lastly, one more incentive, right? So how do we make people care about metrics that they're not directly tied to, like sales bookings, right? And you are actually probably in some other team where you're not even involved in the whole selling process, but you're product and you're building some future-ready feature, right? And that is where we started making everyone in the company care about ownership and stock. Everyone in West Coast seems to care a lot more than anyone in Bangalore. But we started bringing this culture where we said, stock matters. And everyone in the company can get stock. And you would get stock only. We will distribute stock at the end of the year, ESOPs, only if we meet our number for the year. And that number, all of you know. And how your number is related to that number, all of you know. And individually, you have to be rated above expectations. Because you're actually moving everything. If all of you do meets expectations, we know we have budgeted for the goal to be met. So we're just executing by putting people. But if you've done above expectations, you'll probably helped us do better than budget. And for that, you've created extra value that we didn't plan for, right? And for that, please take some of that value. That by itself, and again, it was not easy. It took us 1.5 years of talking about stock, ownership, how it's linked to their performance, actually showing them how the numbers met, and then working really hard that year for the numbers to meet, because we can't say we have this amazing policy and sorry, this year we are not giving stock because we didn't meet our numbers, right? We really worked hard. For almost 2 years, we came to 99% or 101% of that number. And these were not easy numbers. These were 3x growth year on year, right? But last day of the year, we ended up closing deals and deploying accounts to be able to get to that number because it mattered a lot. We had committed to stock. People would not get because we missed the number by 5%. It was just not okay, right? So leadership felt that pressure that they were going to influence fortunes of people, right? So for really long-term goals and for indirect contribution, we've had this as our biggest lever. And the people who joined a startup for the right reasons, our lifestyle, they could have gone and joined any company, probably even made a little bit or same money or more, right? People who joined us for the right reasons get this, right? And they focus on making sure that that happens. And they would throw everything out of the window, including their holidays, if they know that this number is at risk. And that's the culture we've been able to build. Many levers matter. It's not just about what metrics you ask your team to measure, report, and review them on. What matters is how you acknowledge and reward. Many times I've been busy, been outside the country, trying to open some new markets, and suddenly I come back and I see team is so not happy. So I open, office seems very quiet. I do an NPS survey and I realize people feel they're not being acknowledged for things that they've done, right? It's a very simple thing. What we forget in this whole running is, and it depends on your DNA actually, I'm a very get it done and move on kind of a person. So the thing that I used to most often forget is recognition. I used to be very grateful to these people who really pulled all stops to make things happen. And I would say thanks and I would say have a lot of gratitude in my heart, right? But I would not publicly recognize them. Yes, they got stock that no one knows about probably on how much they got, but I would not publicly recognize. And and we learned that this is such a big lever that we were not leveraging. And it's also a lever for many different things, right? So for example, stock, we use it for vision, direction, and values. You're above expectations, which means you're contributing to the path of the company and our speed, etc. And you are aligned to the values of the company, which is ownership, which means you're not constrained by your own KRA, helping others, etc. Variable incentive is your individual contribution and directly linked to one number, not more than that. You can measure it, we'll report it at all points in time so you can see where you stand. There are other metrics that matter. Quality of deals matter, average deal value matters, person who does a 3-year contract matters. That we measure and review, and we sometimes do spot incentives. Hey, here's a person who closed a 5-year contract, more than $250,000 per year, right? Let's give them a spot awards, go to Phuket, right? So we do that so people realize what the company cares about, and the more we speak about these things, people want to be spoken about, right? So they get motivated by, and they start moving in the right direction. We measure and review a lot of stuff that matters, so maybe at least 2-3 different metrics per function is what we measure. We tie variable only to one. Rewards and recognition, which is actually spot awards, acknowledgements, best in team kind of stuff. We do on best behavior, something that someone has shown that we have not been able to do before, right? So use all the levers. Many people forget to use some of these levers and focus overly on just 2, what to tie your variable to, and make it extremely confusing. Lastly, the thing that hurts the most for any founder is to stand up on stage and tell everyone what the number is. It's not easy. You'll have good times. You'll have bad times. It's important to have very high goals and targets like 3x. It's also important to face reality when a month doesn't go well and a quarter doesn't go well. And the point is but you have to create. The moment we created this whole ownership model and this whole KRA reporting culture, right? One town hall, we had this fantastic town hall because we had a fantastic quarter. And then everyone got used to this. And next quarter was a very shitty one. And I had to go up and speak to 70, 80 people on why, and why is that not going to happen, and what are we going to do about it, right? What it drove us as leadership is, at least for 2 weeks before that, everything was diagnosed. Everything was diagnosed until we had a plan to fix it and change it. And even before the town hall happened, we started changing some of these things. We started moving the needle on whatever that metric was or whatever was influencing that outcome, right? It holds a lot of responsibility at the top level. When you start reporting it, you will see yourself doing the right things. But most importantly, the team anyway knows that shit has happened. They have seen that a new logo has not launched. There is no WhatsApp message on, hey, we won a great booking, etc., right? So they know that it's been quiet for a month or so and mood in the office starts going a bit quieter. They know that something is wrong. And when you don't talk to them, and when you don't explain, here is why things went wrong, here is what we learned, and here is our plan to fix it, they assume the worst. This company is not able to raise funding. Maybe I should start looking for another job, so on and so forth, right? There was a year when we said we won't raise funding because we have cash in the bank. But who will believe that, right? So we actually had to show cash in the bank, right? And hire salespeople and communicate and talk about that. Right, about the wins that we are getting and the runway that we have and why we believe that we should wait for 6 more months to get a higher valuation, etc. But just communication is the most important thing. Make sure you measure stuff you are asking the team to focus on. Make sure you're reporting it, holding yourself accountable for that, and make sure you're repeating in every conversation the same number, right? In review conversations and feedback conversations, in account review conversations, etc. Now, I think the session was originally planned to be what are the important SaaS metrics. So my suggestion is Google them, because there's a lot of Google Gyan on this stuff. My key takeaway is, though, don't get confused. Stick to one. Make sure it's the one thing that your company needs for those 6 months or 12 months, and make sure you can reasonably well break it down amongst people who need to run this stuff, right? This was just a Google image, by the way. But if you really want me to tell you what the metrics are, when you're really young, which seems to be like a lot of people in this room, right? Focus on a very few things. In Vymo, the number one thing that we focused on when we started the company, I remember the only number I remember that we spoke about for 3 months, 6 months was DAO. It was DAO for us because we said salespeople don't use CRMs, field salespeople, and we are going to change that. We are going to give them something of value that they will want to use, and because of that, we will learn. Then we'll know what the best sales guys are doing, and we'll use that to guide the rest. There's only one way to measure it. Are they using it or not? For us, it was DAO, and that was the one number I remember from the day we gave it to the first user. We knew that number, we tracked it insanely closely, right? I think bookings, dollars came much later for us, but that mattered most. So the most important thing is to track what matters to your end user or customer. Track that first. VCs ask that as a bullet point question later, but for you, that should matter a lot, because if that is not broken, then most probably, you're doing wishful thinking. You'll sell a few things, but maybe not scale. Number of customers, users matter, bookings matter, dollar ARR matters. Once you start hitting 300, 400K, not before that. Average ticket size matters. Not early on. Once you get 5, 6 logos, it's important to see what your ticket size is. And there's a whole different session we can do on how do ticket sizes put you, like, I don't know if you have read the whole elephant versus whale versus deer strategies, and how your entire product design, go-to-market, sales team structure, everything will be like, everything they're speaking about in inside sales, Vymo doesn't do any of that. Nothing. And we are reasonably same scaled as at least a couple of people on the stage, right? Earlier session. Because we target only whale accounts, large accounts, 250K plus deals, right? So there's no calling and that kind of, that is not the biggest lever for us, right? So knowing your average customer ticket size matters a lot, because that defines everything: product, service delivery, customer success, engineering, everything. Cash burn. Hopefully you guys are positive until you hit like 500,000 or 1 million. But cash burn matters because the amount of cash you have in bank and how quickly you can generate that is basically defining how quickly you can put it in levers that will help you grow, right? So then a lot of things starts coming and you can Google it and it's very tedious. The very important thing, don't let facts cloud your judgment. Don't let facts cloud your judgment. VCs love LTV by CAC metric. It should be greater than 3. Every founder knows that. But do not give this gyan to your sales leader. Okay? Give him things that he can digest and work on. We tell a sales guy, you should, if you're hiring a guy, he's expensive, yes, but it's okay. I won't judge, yeah. Let salespeople make money. Yes, his salary is like 250K plus 250K. Make sure that he does 10 times of that in bookings. If you're willing to take the target, give the guy the target, go hire him. Right? So make it things that they can easily make decisions on the basis of. If you tell a sales leader about these SaaS metrics, you will just lose them, right? Or simple things that we tell, right? Like hire an AE. An AE's quota is $1 million in Vymo. So if you can create $1 million pipeline in a quarter, which means you can create 4 in a year, which means you can have 25% conversion and close $1 million in booking. So the moment you can build $1 million pipeline in a quarter, go hire an AE. No one will question that because the numbers work out. LTV by CAC will be very good if you manage to do that, right? But that is your problem. Don't confuse investor metrics and MIS and company health metrics with how you talk to your team. Keep it very simple for them. That's it. Keep it to one metric. Roll down your vision. Make sure teams collaborate and use all the 4 levers. Very, very rarely have I seen people people hold equity like, so give it to the team. Measure, report, and keep repeating it in every conversation on what you care most about and how that number is moving. That's it. 20 seconds left. Any questions? Yeah? Hi.
Quick question about the sales pipeline. So we're below $1 million ARR. So how do you focus on hiring salespeople and what kind of people do you hire at that point in time? Because not everybody's focusing on the whales. Someone like us, we're targeting on the SME market, right?
Yeah.
So how do you create a sales team? And
nobody else focuses on whales. Someone thinks we are stupid too, but yeah.
No.
I get it. So what's your average ticket size?
Around a few $100 per user per account.
Okay. Few $100 per user per
account.
And average ticket sizes with the company?
So that's about $1,200 a user, roughly about 5 users per company. So that's about $6,000 a company.
$6,000 a company. So most probably you're doing inside sales, maximum calling.
We're doing mostly product sales. We're not even doing inside sales because the CAC to LTV
Correct.
ratio is
Yeah.
really
So if you're able to do product sales, then phenomenal.
Yes.
Then what you should be probably, I'm not the best placed in this. Whatfix probably, Prakar might be a better.
No, I'm not asking about that product sales bit. I'm talking about the enterprise sales bit because now we're trying to graduate from product sales to enterprise sales because the product's finally fully ready to be able to sell to enterprises, but we're not doing that kind of volumes. So how do you go about hiring a sales team that will get that kind of results?
Okay.
That's the question.
So what kind of enterprises are you targeting and ticket sizes?
Yeah, this is the bit I'm not really sure.
Okay.
About.
So my point of view is if you're sub 1 million,
yes,
and you are growing and seeing reasonable traction in the 600K ticket sizes. 6,000K ticket sizes, right? Do everything and leverage every lever so you can get to 3 to 5 million at that segment.
You're saying in product sales segment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do not try to change your go-to-market model. The moment you start going to 30K, people's expectation of the product will be different. They'll assume that you'll do integrations with their core tech, etc. They'll assume that you'll show up face-to-face sometime. The moment you touch 100K, they'll assume you'll be sitting in their office. Some of the accounts, right? So you will have to budget for that. There might be new generation companies which may not expect you to, but in general, you'll have to budget for that if you want to get to 100 million and using that kind of account base. Mm-hmm. The question is, how big can you get with the $6,000 ticket sizes, right? And if you can get to a 3 to 5, do not change your track is the recommendation that I would have, because there is a lot that needs to change on product, nature of the salesperson, how you do marketing, and how you drive customer success after that.
So exactly that's the same concern that we have at this point in time. So we're trying to drive product sales. It's starting to scale now because it took us an inordinate amount of time to create the product because it's quite complex. We've got about 27 services built into it. So now it's there, and now the product's ready at a point where next year we can start selling to the enterprises. It's a different market.
Okay.
So India, we are doing the SMEs, but internationally, we want to go to the enterprises.
Yeah.
Because we don't really want to create.
Yeah. See, the simple answer, I can answer your question straight away, right? Depending on the sector and the audience, if you're trying to target manufacturing companies, sales leaders, then go hire someone in SAP because they sell a lot to manufacturing companies, sales leaders, right? It's very straightforward. And within that community, try to find people who are reasonably younger, want to take risks, etc. So that's the straight away answer. The thing I'm not going to take responsibility for is you going behind enterprise. Let me just disclaim.
No, that's fine.
that
That's a business decision.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay. Coffee time? Oh. Yeah, go on.
How did you decide that you are going to go after from the day one, like 250K accounts?
So it started with by saying, can we get 100K? Because we realized sales transformation, the senior stakeholders have to be involved. It's easy to deploy a tool, but it's not easy to drive change management, right? So that was one angle for transformation and for learning from best salespeople through the tools, behavior, etc. We needed certain volumes, right? Second, this is something that I spoke about at SaaS Boomi. The most important thing, I think, was our DNA. I was giving the example where there is no founder here in Bangalore or even in the US that I've seen who have crossed the 3-4 million mark, etc., who have built something for a target customer that they're not familiar with before building the company. I used to work at McKinsey. I used to talk to CXOs all the time of large enterprises. I actually knew how to talk to them, not to an average end user, right? And of course, we got to daily usage, etc. My co-founder is Google, so he has the end user angle, etc. But the way we sell, the way we validated the product early on, what were the first 3 customers and users we picked to be able to test the product promise, etc. Everything ended up coming from my DNA. So it turned out to be a very large enterprise. Freshdesk, Girish comes from Zoho background. Zoho sells to SME, right? So when Freshdesk started, it came from that DNA, right? So that's the segment that they target. And they've tried doing enterprise. It's not that they've not tried, right? But it takes a very different DNA or a completely different leader within the company to come and start that axis. But the fruit doesn't fall very far from the tree. I was saying this in SaaS Boomi that I looked around the room and said, except for Krish at ChargeBee, who you heard before, I don't know anyone, because Krish was at TCS and then he started this whole SMB mid-market company, right? I don't know anyone who's gone cross-segment. And Krish raised his hand and said, we have 4 co-founders. The other 3 actually are ex-Zoho or some other SMB, right? So it's in your DNA. If you feel you can have a conversation endlessly with a customer profile of this type, observe them, understand, cater to them, you know that's the segment that you should be targeting, ideally, right? And that should take you at least until the 10 million range or so, I believe firmly. You should not deviate from that.
Can you speak a bit more about the the 1 KRAs which should be tracked for the product team?
We do DAO. Okay. DAO, for our product, it depends on what your product is, right? Number of acquisitions, etc. If you're focusing heavily on that. DAO, we have had 70% DAO since we started the company because we never let it go down because we are so focused on that, right? DAO, later we started defining it more aggressively. DAO means number of writes, not just reads. DAO means 3 reads a day, 3 writes a day, managers also. So we started defining what DAO for the company means. But otherwise for product, that's the one, that single metric that matters most. And if we are investing in new features, then we have to be able to tie it up to a major segment of our users, like managers or sales reps, and their adoption and usage increasing.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you everyone.